It's now my pleasure to introduce two of our McGraw Prize winners in education to come up and we'll have a short conversation. Terry McGraw is here, and he sponsors with us in McGraw-Hill Education the Harold W. McGraw Jr. Prize in Education, and so that prize celebrates innovation. It's been a great prize for more than 20 years. Tremendous people. Last night we had tremendous speeches by two of our award winners. There's a nomination and selection process, a international jury. People bring in talent, find talent around, and so if Christine and Sandy could come up, we'll begin the process of introducing you to the two of them. Christine's coming up. She's so Christine and Sandy, come on over.
And so in the middle, yeah.
And so Christine is the founder of Engineering is Elementary, and what she's really done is she has really taken it to the people to find a way to get people to understand that every human being is an inventor, a discoverer, a tinkerer, a builder, a dreamer. Every human being is by nature that. We're an unbelievably adaptive species that through specialization has beaten out of our own species the human nature, the human abilities that we actually have. And so Christine's done a fantastic job now engaging millions of students, helping people to understand things. 13 million now, is that the number, right? 13 million students down to the elementary level, moving down even to the kindergarten and pre-kindergarten level. And then Sandy's one of the great national leaders, Valencia College president, who takes no prisoners, on making things work across every dimensionality. And he gave a great talk last night at a dinner that we had, where he was reminding all of us. About the fact that we have, in a sense, lost our minds somewhat by not realizing what human beings actually can do. So, Sandy, why don't you just talk a little bit about your basic theory about what can a human being learn?
Well, one of the cornerstones, the sort of working theories of Valencia's work for 20 years has been to recognize that anyone can learn anything under the right conditions.
Anyone can learn anything under the right conditions.
Yeah, and so it changes the conversation in the institution, where instead of sorting learners, we're changing conditions in partnership with the learners. And it's a scientific truth, but it's hard to persuade people with evidence. And so mostly we tell stories about it. And the story I shared last night was about death by PowerPoint, trying to prove that to a group of teachers who probably didn't believe it. And one approached me afterwards and said, well, I think it's probably true that anyone can learn anything under the right conditions in most disciplines. And I said, well, what is it you teach? She said, German, and it's really difficult. It's a hard language. It's kind of non-intuitive and so on. And after 15 years of teaching German, I can tell you there's some people who just can't learn it. And to which the reply is, how fortunate for them they weren't born in Germany.
Yes.
And so,
it'd be really hard if you're born in Germany and you couldn't learn German. So this carries over into math also.
Well, once people kind of get the punchline on German, that there's no Deutsche gene that makes you a good German learner in Germany. It's the conditions of learning German in Germany. Then the next step is, and what is math? It's a language. And those of us who've taught math over the years know that at some point, the students who succeed kind of crack the code, and the language begins to make sense to them. It's more about the language of math than it is the concepts.
Well, the weird thing about math is that math in many ways is simpler than spoken languages, because it's more rigid than a spoken language, which is dynamic and changing and shifting and so forth. So how is it that we have such difficulty accepting the fact that it's just a language? We should be able to teach it. We should be able to advance it. We should teach in a different way. You said some things last night I thought were fantastic, because they play into our we believe in your philosophies a lot, and we're advancing on them a lot. Our math programs are built around the notion that anyone can learn anything. Anyone can learn anything, including college algebra, including calculus, including pre-calculus, or whatever the subject happens to be. what do you think is the reason that we've fallen off this cliff and turned ourselves into a group now that somehow thinks that only some people can learn some things?
Well, I think the first thing to recognize is that this is the only society, advanced society in the world that has this problem. This isn't true in the US. It's not true in Europe. It's not true in Asia. I can't find any place else that has this math issue. It's only us. It must be cultural in nature, therefore.
I blame, who do you blame? I know who I blame.
Well, it's probably my fault. That's the way I think about most things.
Don't blame Sam. I blame the way that we have allowed our colleges and universities to become separated, overly specialized in some ways. So I blame us. But we produce the teachers, the principals, the designs of the programs. There's social issues also. But
I think there are troubling issues in schools generally that have diverted their attention from learning to other things over 3 generations.
Yeah.
But I think the fundamental issue in learning that's been missed in America is that despite protestations to the contrary, we still teach from concept to application instead of from concrete insight to generalized understanding.
Yeah.
And the brain just doesn't work that way. We're teaching counter to the way the brain learns.
So, Christine, you've been taking this, right to the people, so to speak. I mean, you're like, we're all engineers, we're all technologists, we're all inventors. I forgot who wrote the book about, every baby is a scientist. Every human is a discoverer. Every human is carrying out scientific experiments. I dropped that rock on my foot. I have some understanding of gravity. I don't know what the word gravity means, but I'm not dropping that rock on my foot anymore. And so how is it that, or why is it that this isn't obvious?
It's not obvious that all students
why
are
is it that it's not that we don't have everybody, that every curriculum in every elementary school includes some kind of technology part, that just talk a little bit about what you're doing. And what I mean by not obvious is that why are we not doing this? I mean, we're giving you a prize because you figured this out, and that means everybody else is stupid.
No, I think the curriculum, the formal curriculum in schools became codified many years ago.
So codification of the curriculum.
In the early 1800s, and there were probably reasons for doing it at the time, and folks did engineering and problem solving at homes in certain ways. But once it wasn't an acceptable part of at least the K-12 curriculum, it dropped off of the radar screen. And so part of what we needed to think about is if we need problem solvers and if we want problem solvers, college is too late. We're born, I believe every young child is a natural engineer. You can watch them build ski jumps and forts and bridges, and they'll build them and knock them down and build them again. And through that doing, that concrete experience, they come to learn about the world around them. But I like to say that we've traditionally educated that out of students once they get to K-12 schools, kindergarten. There's a right answer. We're all gearing toward the same answer. You get it right or you get it wrong. And we forget that there are many different ways and creative ways to solve problems. And so it's a shift in what we're trying to do from introducing students to facts that you memorize to helping them develop habits of mind to problem solve for issues that we don't know what they're going to face 20 years from now when they graduate. And so how do we develop a different way of learning and support teachers? Because this is a shift from standardized tests that you can measure with bubbles to developing a generation of kids that can think creatively.
So give an example of what your 3rd or 4th graders are doing.
So the way we've chosen to help introduce children to problem solving is first to talk very closely with practicing teachers and ensure that what we're doing fits with current reality of schools. And when we did that, they told us that the engineering that they did would need to integrate with subjects they already taught. And we chose science as the primary integrator. So each of the lessons that we develop starts by looking at what children have developed in a commonly taught science topic in elementary school. So they might learn about insects, or they might learn about magnets, or they might learn about weather. And then we have them apply those science topics as they solve an engineering challenge. So for instance, most little children will learn about butterflies and life cycles of plants at some point when they're 6, 7, maybe 8 years old. And as they do that, we encourage them to think about becoming agricultural engineers and design a hand pollinator, a device that will pick up and drop off pollen to pollinate a model flower. And as they think about that, they need to think about how would they go through that problem-solving process, what are the criteria and constraints, what does that hand pollinator need to do? It needs to pick up and drop off pollen. They need to learn a lot about materials and their properties, which is a real core idea across all of engineering, but particularly with young children, they are still figuring out that a pom-pom is a better way to pick up simulated pollen, which we use baking soda, than a marble. Almost every adult can tell you that the pom-pom work better than a marble. So I tell teachers, you know all the engineering you need to know to teach it to 6 and 7-year-olds. But that is not obvious for a 6-year-old. They're still doing that hands-on manipulation to understand how materials affect design choices and what they can do. And so we'll walk students through a scaffolded problem-solving process to help them build the kinds of data-driven decisions, to learn to work in teams, to apply the science that they've learned to that challenge.
So for either of you, I mean, you're working, we're getting past this by pushing and pushing and pushing these other models. What else do we need to do? So what's your list of things that we should be doing?
Well, the first thing is that we've got to embrace the notion that this is for everybody and not for
education for everyone.
Yeah, it's for everyone. The second is that
was on some of my slides.
there are no good excuses for systematic differences in learning performance among people from different backgrounds.
No excuses. That's what I tell our football coach.
That's right.
Yeah, I would echo the same two things. So the fundamental commitment we had when we started thinking about what engineering would look like with really young children is that anything that we did had to reach all students. And so we actually design with the most underrepresented and under-resourced groups in mind. And if you can design experiences that work to attract them, retain them, and help them see themselves as a problem solver and engineer, it can work anywhere.
So everyone, no separation, right? And so we've got this separation that's occurring in all these grades and all along the way in some schools.
Right.
What other ideas?
Leverage their humanity. In other words, teaching and learning is a social process, not just a psychological process. It's a community-based experience, whether that community is virtual or immersive.
Those are some of the innovations that I would...
Absolutely, and the use of technology to enhance the personal connection,
Right.
not just between student and teacher, but among students,
Right.
Is vital.
Self-assembling learning groups, everything imaginable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the community, I would echo the classroom as a community, and what we want to do is help children be able to interact with other kids, particularly kids who may not think like them. There's a big diversity. The more we can learn what makes somebody else interesting. Engineering is driven by out-of-the-box thinking. So the more diversity of ideas and people that you bring, the better your solution
So
will be.
just to be clear to everyone, what we're talking about is not producing more engineers, people that might be an engineer in their life. That's not what we're talking about.
We want problem solvers.
Yeah, we're problem solvers. We want people who are capable of learning how to learn, learning how to solve problems, and I use the word learning how to adapt. And so human beings are unbelievably adaptive creatures. But through our specialization, in some ways we have weakened the individual's ability to somehow be adaptive sometimes. What else?
I would say investing in teachers and teacher development. If you're changing some of the foundations and the way you want classrooms to look, we need to support teachers to understand that vision and then also support and change systems so that they are behind those teachers. And that's a big change in elementary school to go from you're going to fill out this worksheet to I'm going to give you a totally open-ended challenge, all kinds of materials, and say, go, 7-year-olds, and somehow we're going to have learning come out of that. And so working closely with the teachers who really understand how children learn, but also supporting them through that process, I think is critical.
One last comment?
I think we need different kinds of leadership, Michael. I think So much of what we're trying to do in education reform is to work around the folks who ought to be the solutions. So many of the solutions essentially say the teachers are the problem, the principals are the problem, the college presidents and deans are the problem. I think I don't have much hope that that's going to succeed in the end. I think in the end we've got to flip the conversation and say what kind of leadership empowers that kind of learning. And it's leadership for impact rather than leadership for institutional success.
Okay. Well, let's congratulate our McGraw Prize winners this year.